Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore Remote. I am Elizabeth, the events coordinator for Gibson's Bookstore, and I am very excited to have this event for us tonight. We are welcoming author Richard Mirabella with his new book, Brother and Sister Enter the Forest. It is a novel. It sounds like a fairy tale. It starts like a fairy tale. It doesn't end quite like a fairy tale. He is joined in conversation by his editor, Lee Newman. Hi, hello to both of you.
Hello, thank you so much.
I'm so glad to have the two of you here. Richard's book is available from Gibson's Bookstore. It is recently released. We do ship anywhere and we'd be happy to get you a copy. Lee, Richard, you two have a conversation planned, so I will let the two of you get to it. Thank you for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you.
Well, Richard, you know how much I love your book, so this is going to be very easy conversation. I mean, I remember like from the first page, I was like, what? I thought maybe we should just talk a little bit about what the book is in case some people haven't read it and they just want a little bit more. So your book is set in upstate New York about a brother and sister, and there is that fairy tale quality to it. But the brother has had a traumatic brain injury, his building falls down, and then he comes to visit his sister. And because of his brain injury and the past, their relationship is like very fraught, you know? How did you, one of the things I love about this book is how you capture the brother-sister dynamic in all of its like hilarity and then all of its painfulness and all of its rage and even violence, you know, kind of in a way, not violence that they hurt each other, but there's like this threat, you know, like he locks him out of the house and he burns himself as a kid. I mean, did you have sisters? I mean, how did you know? I mean, do you have siblings? I've never asked you this.
Oh, I know. It's so funny. It's funny. You're my editor. We worked together, but we didn't really have a chance to have these conversations.
I know.
Face to face anyway. We did over email and the phone.
That's the pandemic for you.
Yeah. But no, I have a brother. I have an older brother. I don't have a sister. But I've always been fascinated by brother and sister stories. And I started writing about siblings, and at first it was two sisters, and then one became a brother. And then I read the Grimm's fairy tale, Little Brother and Little Sister, and that sort of helped me.
Can you tell us that story, that Grimm fairy tale?
So that is about a little brother and sister who flee from their, of course, violent and horrible stepmother, who they don't know is also a witch. And they flee into the forest, and while in the forest, the brother drinks from a cursed stream and is transformed into a fawn. And the sister says, you know, oh, I'll care for you for the rest of our days, you know. She ends up marrying a king, and the fawn brother sort of retreats into the background of the story. But I thought I would write about someone who has been transformed and the people in his life who fail to deal with that. I'm interested in the failure of care.
Yeah.
So I think Willa, the sister, is trying very hard, but I don't think she's equipped to deal with her brother. And with siblings, I'm very interested in the idea of this person that you're kind of stuck with because of love or family entanglements. And it's very hard to create boundaries sometimes with family. So yeah, that was a big part of why I wrote this book.
Well, it's so convincing. I thought you were going to say you had two sisters and this is how it was.
No.
But yeah, because it's extreme too, because half of the novel is set in the present day when the brother has been injured and his apartment building falls down and he shows up at his sister's house. And the other half of the novel is set in the past when they were teenagers and this horrible thing happens to the brother that changes his life. I don't want to spoil the plot. It's particularly that like adolescent part where they're, you know, bickering and fighting. And, you know, I know he sets off a Roman candle, like a penis, and sprays like sparks everywhere. And in both cases too, like the mother is particularly ill-equipped. I mean, it's hilarious and it's also harrowing. Those are the two words I kept thinking. Like it's hilarious, but it's also harrowing. Could you talk a little bit about the mother, Grace? Because she's such a difficult character. You'd think you'd hate her because she's so mean, but you don't.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be like, oh, she's this horrible person and you just hate her and that's it.
No,
I hope she has complexity, and
she
also
does.
good. And also she's grieving. Her husband is dead. So
Yeah.
she's dealing with the situation where she's been left alone with these two kids, and one of them is very difficult. You know, Justin is not a saint. That was also important to me.
Oh no.
He is a difficult person before anything happens to him. But also, why shouldn't he be difficult? He's a queer kid growing up in a place that's very unfriendly to queerness. His own mother doesn't really understand or know how to handle that. But for me, Grace is, she's interesting because you see these little flashes in her of care and of love and attention, and she's trying, but she fails a lot, and she says the wrong thing a lot.
Yeah, like at the wedding of her daughter, she says many wrong things.
Absolutely, yeah. But then there are moments, you know, I won't give them away, of tenderness.
Yes.
And that was very important to me to show. It doesn't make you go, oh, I was wrong about her. She's just a person. She's complicated.
Well, I think that's what you do so successfully, is that the characters, even the minor ones, even the ones that don't have as much screen time, like the man that hurts Justin, has complexity. And that's why when I think about this book, often I say, like, if I had to pick an adjective, because there is sadness and there is like this gallows humor. I mean, and there is like moments of just like total absurdism. The brother and sister in their later life, when they're adults, have this neighbor, Mrs. Flores, who's like smoking, and you know, I love her, you know, and her the one thing she asks them when she's like, do you smoke? Like as if she's gonna, you know. So I keep coming back to this word pathos. That's what I think the book has. Like, were you thinking about that word or that quality when you were writing it? I mean, or did it just, that's what I think of. And that, like, it's almost like, it almost hurts when you read it because you're laughing and feeling pain at the same time. And in the best of ways, I mean, it hurts, you know?
I wasn't. I mean, I really was trying to just write something that I thought made sense to me and was, I hate saying realistic because I think there are moments in this book that are kind of big.
Yeah, but it's realistic. Sort of, no, it's realistic.
Yeah. And I want to tell the truth about how I think things happen to people and not, I didn't want it to be easy. And I knew it was very dark. So kind of later in the process, I tried to go back into some moments and impart a little bit more humanity and lightness and humor. And I think there is some in dialogue between characters and in certain moments.
Oh, for sure there is, you know, like even in the opening scene when the brother comes and interrupts the sister with her boyfriend and interrogates him, like, what are you doing here?
Right. Yeah.
You look like a serial killer. And the boyfriend's like, no, I don't. I'm just a vet. I mean, I'm saying, so actually that's what I was going to say. Like, well, I noticed that this guy, Matthew, just asked, are there cuts that you made to your book? As far as how long did it take you to write this book?
That's a really hard question to answer because, I mean, 5 years, I'll say, but I wrote a draft of it very, very quickly, like in a month. But it was a huge mess. It bears no resemblance to this object.
So wait, what year did you write that fast draft?
2015. And then I rewrote it twice from beginning to end without looking at that first draft. And talk about cutting, that's mostly what I did, was cut and kind of pull things out that I liked. And then the structure of going back and forth in time sort of happened.
When you wrote that first draft, was it about two sisters or was it about the sister and the brother?
It was about the sister and the brother.
Okay, so that was a real
setup. Was, yeah.
After you read the fairy tale.
And one of the, all of Willa's stuff was in first person. And actually that really helped later.
Why? Because I think I teach at NYU and I've had this happen like 3 times where I've had students come in with like a big chunk of a novel and like something will just not work. I can just tell that something's wrong. And often it's in first person. And because it's in first person and it's so close to the narrator, I'll get confused. Like they're not explaining enough that I can like understand where we are. I'm like, I get very bewildered. And I do think often I ask them to switch to third person limited. Just in case there's anybody out there doesn't know what that means. Third person, general is omniscient where you're in everybody's head, and third person limited is when you're in one character's head and you can switch off chapters like Richard does so effectively, brother, sister. And I think there's a mother. I don't, okay. But,
yeah.
What made you say, okay, I got to take this out of, why was the first person helpful? And then why did you switch?
I switched because I prefer third person. And I just also, it's so funny, like, I don't know why I wrote in first person. I never do. I think it just started because I needed to get into a character. I never have ideas. So I just was like, I'm going to start writing my brother, blah, blah, blah. And I just started talking in Willa's voice. But I knew I wanted my book to be in third person. Changing all of those sections to third person was a pain in the ass.
I bet.
But also it was very helpful in getting to know Willa a little bit more. I felt like Justin, I knew how to talk about him. But Willa, I needed a little more help getting into her.
Does finding the right name help you? I feel like finding a name is so important in the character.
Yeah, that's everything. I mean, a name is so important. Yeah.
Isn't it?
I always had Willa.
She is perfect.
Yeah, I love her.
And Justin's perfect too.
Yeah, I think so.
Another technical question. Oh wait, I don't want to ask another question. So I have a friend that had a serious brain injury. And he's never been the same. Like he was injured in a car accident in Alaska and it's kind of like on this terrible pass and his car flipped over and that was it, like from 18 on to this day.
God.
And I've thought about writing about him because he has behavior like Justin, very different. And his verbal abilities are different in that he can speak in almost in a very like simplistic way, but then he has like great vocabulary. He was really smart and it just comes out sometimes. And he's like speaking like Shakespeare. So you can't, how did you familiarize yourself with a brain injury enough that I could believe Justin's perspective? Not for one second did I doubt that this was somebody who had a brain injury. To do that.
I was really worried about it. And one thing is that there's tremendous variability with traumatic brain injury and with recovery from traumatic brain injury. So I watched a few documentaries about coma and like waking up from coma. I read a book about concussion. So I did a little bit of research. I mostly just followed instinct and kind of, I did a little bit of reading here and there. So I think Justin's issues become apparent with his inability to control certain aspects of his life that are just sort of rote for people without TBI, holding a job, being able to control, I don't know, like his emotions. You know, Justin is someone who bursts into tears at really interesting times, or you know, creates conflict with his family, and also his drinking is a way to self-medicate, and that is very common with people
Very
with
common.
TBI.
My friend had that problem too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he could drink like 75 beers because he would just go to, like, the executive function was gone where you would stop at,
right.
You know, no, you'd stop at 7 beers, he'd get to 75. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
But I also thought it was interesting how he wasn't like all necessary, like he was innocent in the way of certain social cues.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he jumps into his landlady's bed to keep her warm. You know what I mean? He doesn't understand why her daughter might think that was upsetting.
Right.
It's one of my favorite scenes.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought about, you know, his not having boundaries with people, or thinking, oh, this is a good idea, you know, like, let me take her out on a freezing, you know, walk in her wheelchair, you know, this person who is already kind of ill.
Yeah.
And then get into bed with her and hold her in my arms, you know. And he's seeking connection with somebody, but he doesn't think about the consequences.
Yeah. You know, you described this when I first met you, or I don't even know if I met you. So remember what happened? It was like, I had the book for a year, but somehow like it gotten lost. I started reading it and I fell in love with you. And I literally tweeted you. Is that it, or did I do it on Instagram? And I was like, is your book sold? Who was your agent?
Yeah, you tweeted at me, not even a DM, you tweeted at me, RP Mirabella, follow me so I can message you. And then...
That's not how Twitter works. It's true. I'm the worst. You know who cares about me on Twitter? No one, because I don't know how to do it. But I love Instagram because you don't have words.
Yeah, it's true. But then, okay, yeah, you DM'd me and said, did you sell your book yet? Yeah.
Did that make you feel happy or nervous?
It made me feel very happy and very nervous too.
Yeah.
But it was great because it had been on submission for a year and a month at that point, I think. And maybe like the week before you wrote to me, I had a phone call with Christopher, with my agent, just saying like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, I'm like bursting into tears every day, like, because it was also the pandemic, and
that's why it was. That was the only delay. I will tell you, I had so much trouble. I shouldn't say this in public, but I don't care. I had so much trouble selling my book during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, weeks would pass and my agent kept saying it's the pandemic, and I was selling it during the summer of 2020. Who would do that? But we thought at that point, you thought, well, the pandemic could go for forever. We might as well just go ahead and try and sell this. You know what I mean? People would answer, and she was calling everybody all the time. And it took weeks and weeks and weeks. And I mean, I cried too. I was like, you want this turkey? Turkey? And your book is so brilliant. You know, you think it had been a different time. I mean, I would have been, and also I will say, in my own self-defense, I was like raising 2 kids alone in a farmhouse, and I thought the world was ending. So I did miss manuscripts.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's like we were ghosted.
The minute I picked it up, I was like, I want to buy this. I mean, for me, when I read something 3 pages in, I know, right? Oh, mood. People talk about, it's exactly right. You feel the sentences, you feel the mood of the book, and whatever else, I feel like you can fix it pretty much. I mean, unless you're truly bad at storytelling, which is what I think of as plot, I can think of it as storytelling. Then, you know, mostly it's like, how do you tell it? How do you set the mood? Do you know what you're doing with your sentences? Do I want to keep reading? And if it's great voice like yours, of course I did. I was like, what the heck is going on here? Remember how you called it? You said, this is my big gay thriller.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, we're not selling it to the public like that.
Good. Yeah.
No, it doesn't say. It doesn't say.
No.
A big gay thriller. But it does. Okay, so thriller's not the right word, but it is turning. It's very page turning. Were you thinking about pressure on the story? I know I was, because I'm your editor, but it was already there. Were you thinking about how do I keep the pressure on the story?
Yeah. And after a while, I thought, I was like, I couldn't tell. I thought, oh, this is boring. I can't tell if this is any good. But in the beginning, I thought, I'm not in a point, I'm a debut. Like, this has to be interesting. Like, things have to happen, it has to move. And that was a conscious effort to have momentum in the story. But that is not.
But technically, how did you create it? I know how you did, but I want to see what you say. How did you create it?
I honestly don't know, because it's not something that comes naturally to me. I don't have like plotty story ideas. It took a lot of writing and a lot of false turns, characters that I've removed, situations that are no longer in the book. Once I had everything in place, I just thought, I just want it to have movement, to keep moving forward. And I knew, like, I like the idea of tension and suspense and different layers of it.
Right.
Not just like, oh, we're worried about what happened to him. That's not enough. Like,
no. Yeah. That is so interesting that you're saying that. Yes, because it is, like, technically you could say the tension is created because you have this present day story with a brother and sister, and you wonder why they're not getting along. You wonder why the mother's not taking care of herself, and you wonder why all this friction. So by going back into the past and showing the past story, what happened to Justin, it does inform the present, and you want to find out what happened in the past, and then you're seeing how it affects in the present. So that's one part of it. But you're right, there's that other layer of like how the dynamics, the emotional dynamics between the brother and the sister, or the brother and the mother, or the sister and the mother kind of implode or feed off each other. And the friend, right. I forget what Willa's best friend was named.
Jenny.
Yeah, Jenny. She got the normal name.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I thought, like, okay. And then Shivam, the boyfriend, comes into it. Yeah. And I thought,
I loved him.
Me too. What's going to happen? Yeah, he did. He was kind of a gift for Justin from me.
Yeah.
But I also didn't want that to be perfect either. Like, there are issues at hand here. There are issues of codependency, of like, what is a partner's, I guess, role in dealing with someone who needs care, who needs, attention. I think Justin is surrounded by people who don't necessarily know what's best for him. But they're trying.
They're trying. They are trying. Were you, I talked about the thriller part when you said my big gay thriller.
That was, I have to say, I didn't really think that. My agent thought, like, I think this is like a literary horror novel, this is like, and I was like, maybe, I don't know.
Whatever it was, it got my attention. Big gay thriller to me is an exciting thing. I was like, yes. But I was like, no, I'm joking. But I do want to talk a little bit too about the struggles of Justin being gay in this small town. And I guess it was like, even more so than the abuse that he suffered at the high school, was the thing that just moved me so deeply, was the love that he had for his abuser, just because it was he falls in love with this older man, and that's like his only chance to have, romantic love, and he picks the worst person, but he loves him so much. And when you think about how blind love is when you're 15, and then you're queer and you're surrounded by straight people, and this person seems to, give you everything that you probably dreamed of, it was incredibly moving. You knew it was not a good idea, that guy was not a good boyfriend for Justin, but that also set up a lot of tension, because you kept going, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really an interesting dynamic to me. And Nick sort of comes out of a lifetime of mistrusting a certain kind of man.
Yeah.
And he's like every guy I've ever been frightened of, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But also, I like that the first time we see him, he's taking care of Justin. You know, he literally puts Justin in the bath, which to me
Yeah.
was like a James Purdy moment, if there ever was
Yes.
one.
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
throw you in the bath and wash you, you know,
Yeah.
and Justin is kind of like just allowing it to happen, but uncomfortable with being taken care of. He's not used to it. Um, but then you start to kind of see, you get little hints about the way Nick, this person, views the world and views manhood, and he's with Justin, but he sees Justin as a sissy, you know,
Yeah.
and the world's going to eat you alive kind of thing.
That macho-itis, you know, in
Yeah.
almost a psychotic way.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. It's totally
psychotic
poisonous.
macho-itis, you know.
Right.
And he's also promiscuous. He's like looking at other men on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. It's just that, you see Justin loves him so much. It's just a little bit hard sometimes because that
Right.
the way Justin feels about him, Nick doesn't feel the same way back, you know?
Right. And I wanted Nick to be mysterious. I didn't want him to have his own POV
Yeah.
sections, because what is he doing? What is he up to? Like, why is he on the computer? Who's calling him on the phone? Like, I wanted Justin to kind of be in the dark about a lot of things
Well,
with
that
Nick.
makes sense too, because he was a teenager and he's clueless. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I have two teenagers and I'm not sure what they would, they could look through all my papers and they would never understand like what a Verizon, you know what I mean? I don't know. Like
Yeah.
the adult world is complicated. Wasn't this guy Nick was in his 30s, wasn't he? Or much?
No, he's younger.
I made him up in his 30s. He had been in the high school. I know he had been and he graduated.
Yeah, he's in his early 20s.
Okay.
I didn't want him to be much older, because then that's what the book is about. Then the book is about an older man
Oh, right.
abusing a younger man. And I was just like, that's not
Hmm.
what this is about. There's a little bit of that at play, but there's a tremendous push and pull in the queer community about intergenerational love.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
And love between teens and grown gay men. I believe what I believe about it. It's irrelevant, but
Yeah.
I didn't want it to take over my novel. So
Right. Well, that's strategic as an artist. I mean, I think that's why when you said like at the beginning, like, I want to make these people complicated, like Grace is complicated in that she's homophobic in many ways and she's very hard on her children and she's not tender and she's not the nurturing mother. And but then she is, like she yells at them. And then she showers, then she touches their arm or rubs their head. And the same thing is you're creating this complexity with situations, right? You're not like just landing on an issue and illustrating it. The fact that you're avoiding the familiar in your situations, like makes everything kind of gleam with a kind of difference. It's more exciting. That's sort of often happens in your language too, where you're avoiding the familiar in many ways, very subtly. Kind of reminds me sometimes of Dennis Johnson, the way he would sort of bend sentences a little bit. And like, it would look like a normal sentence, but something was not quite normal about it. I don't know if anybody else feels that way in the conversation, but I kept seeing like, little distortions. And I mean, did you want to read a little bit?
Sure.
Can you read for 5 minutes?
Yeah, I can read. Let's see. I've been having so much trouble picking what to read. It's like, I just never know.
Do you know what I do now? I do. Well, it's harder. It's easier to do because I wrote a story and not a novel. Okay. So but for my first book, I used to stress out so much and I would like pick these certain passages and then I would edit them. Like I would cross out certain sentences so it would sound perfect when I was reading. Cause there's a difference between written text and I would get blah, blah, blah. I get myself all worked up and it took an emotional toll. After about a year, it takes a real emotional toll on you. You're like all the time. And so now I do this. I read.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just open That's the story. It might go a page or two to either side of it, but that's what I do. And it makes it really fun.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Okay, so I'm just going to read a little section. This is when they're kids, they're teens, and Justin has just gotten a horrible sunburn.
Yes.
And,
Oh, that's what I was hoping you were going to read. Okay.
Oh, good. I don't know how much of it I don't know, but.
Why don't you just read 2 or 3 pages? It's so
good.
Sure.
Okay. So, horrible sunburn. The next week, his skin started to peel off in white strips. Willa found it discarded here and there. He left it for her. She saw him unwrapping it off his back in front of the bathroom mirror. "Help me," he said. He wore boxer shorts and nothing else. The bathroom smelled of the coconut-scented lotion he'd been using. No, she didn't want to. Where he'd removed the skin, a pale pink, vaguely shiny flesh appeared. His face polished and new, a model of Justin. "If you're not going to help, go away." She remembered how he had cried and begged. She remembered selling him out. "Fine," she said, and chose a flake of skin on the center of his back that begged to be pulled. It detached easily and floated to the floor. Justin laughed. "You'll do anything," he said.
Oh.
She had once loved Justin too much, crushed on him. She hated to think about it. If only she'd been too young to remember, but it must have been when she was 7 or so. It was obvious, too. "You're getting older," her mother said. "You can't flirt with everyone anymore, especially Justin. I never imagined I'd have to explain this to you." "I know that," Willa said. But no, it hadn't occurred to her that she should love her brother in a specific way. She remembered wanting to learn how to be alone, to not need him. She walked in the fields behind the house at the edge of the woods. She lay in the grass for a long time, long enough that she saw herself lying there, and she was no longer a human being. A katydid helicoptered onto her arm and didn't realize it had landed on a person. When she'd gotten back to the house, her body loose and her mind in the grass, her mother jolted her awake and held her by the arm. "Are you insane?" her mother said. Willa examined herself, covered in grass and seeds and ticks, which her mother picked off one by one until she gave up and ordered Willa out of her clothes. They stood on the patio in the backyard, and Willa stripped as slowly as possible. "Hurry up," her mother said. "What do you think? The rabbits are taking pictures?"
Insane. Grace is like, but
Yeah.
I love that because just that kind of moment, like, because everybody has had that dead sunburned skin and nobody talks about it. Usually you pick it off yourself, right? That's the scene that you would see when people, but the fact that she's picking it off her brother, I just never have seen that story. And there's tenderness in it. She's tender with him. And then of course he slaps her right down because that's what that family does. You'll do anything.
Right.
Yeah. And then the complexity of the way also that she says like that she has a crush on her brother, and then her mother's horrible words about it. And then she gets to the point where like, how do I be alone? I mean, there's just so much wisdom in that arc of text.
Thank you.
It does also, I mean, when I listen to the tone, and I know you studied with Joy Williams a little bit, you talk about that a little bit because there is a little bit of an influence there, not in terms of subject, but in terms of language and, style and pathos and, you know what I mean? And something, joie de vivre. No.
Well, thank you. That's a tremendous to hear.
Yeah,
because...
I mean, let's read the quote that she said.
Okay.
"Fitting, relentless, a novel of calm and chilling reserve and accomplishment." Joy Williams. I think everybody would love to get that quote. But talk about studying with her.
So, yeah, it was just incredible. I mean, I started writing this book in 2015, and I thought, I want to write a novel that Joy Williams would like.
Oh.
And I really said that to myself, never imagining I would meet her ever.
Yeah.
And she's such an iconoclast, and the glasses and everything, and so intimidating. But then I met her and she read my work. And
how did you meet her? Just so in case people are writers out there.
I don't have an MFA, so I
love
paid
that
for.
about you. I love that you don't have an MFA. It's one of my favorite parts of getting to publish your book.
Thanks, Lee. So I signed up for the Juniper Writers Institute at UMass Amherst because I heard she taught a workshop there. And I got into it, and I did not bring my book. I wrote short stories and brought stories. And Joy loved my stories. And, so we became friends. I went back for 3 summers, and she read my novel and she loved it. And I think what she appreciated about it was the minimalist quality of it, the tightness and the sharpness, which I worked really hard to get to in this book. Because this kind of.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like you copied. Do you know what I mean? There's no, it's like 2 artists in conversation. Like you took this part of her writing and you moved it in because she's so much more absurd, right? And it's so much quiet change. And you're actually there is absurdism, but it's realistic absurdism, and it's about tone.
Right. I mean, my favorite thing about Joy is this elevated realism. It's like real, but she allows the strange, the absurd to invade. I do that a lot more in my short fiction. This novel is a lot more realistic, but I think there are moments here that are a little bit strange or unusual, like the lake man. Or
let's talk about, because someone in the chat said, can you talk about the mysterious lake man?
I don't want to say too much about the mysterious lake man because I also don't know what that is about.
We just set it up. Justin goes with his boyfriend and they live on a lake for a little bit. And there's some creature or something comes out of the lake at night, and it makes Justin really freak out.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah, that's really all it is. And it's very mysterious, and it's mysterious to me. And I started writing it, and I thought, whatever this is, it's meaningful for Justin. And it's a catalyst for what happens in the second part of the book. And to me, it's also a symptom of when I think of Justin and his trauma, it doesn't have a single, what's the word? Not cause, like referent, It's sort of like this diffuse kind of trauma, and it manifests in these really strange ways. And I think one of them is this feeling of like terror or unease in moments.
Yeah.
There's a moment where he's in a boat on the lake and he's terrified, and he sees someone swimming who never comes up to the surface. And, it's these sort of like eerie moments.
Well, they're like kind of daydream flashback, fugue.
Right.
But I think the important thing is that you feel how afraid he is, and you feel how trapped he is in that fear. He's not going to be able to recover from it in some way.
Right.
Well. There are also, okay. We have a couple more questions, but I think I wanted to ask another question because, so I often think about when I'm writing stories or when I was writing my book, I thought a lot about, like I would have trouble, I would get stuck, like at the end of the day, all of a sudden you're like writing, and then all of a sudden the word "the" looks like really stupid.
Yeah.
The word "the," like I'm a piece of shit. This is, and then I would go read, I called them mother stories. So I read it. And sometimes they were mother stories like Joy Williams, where there's actually a correlation, right? I can see a correlation between my work and Flannery O'Connor. I can see that there's a dialogue there. But sometimes they weren't. They were just like Edna O'Brien, who's this Irish storyteller. And she doesn't sound like anything like, but she's rich in place. And she has very high emotional stakes. Like it's deep emotion she's going for, which is what I want to go for. You know, I'm not trying to be so smart. There's, you know, I want a lot of feeling, like a lot of heartbreak. And even though she's not that funny.
Right.
So who were some other people? Were there other people that you were sort of in dialogue with or thinking about that kind of, or just like that kept you on course, as like that you, whose books you read over and over again as you wrote this?
You know, what's weird there. I read such weird stuff during the writing of this book, and I can think of books that sort of spoke to it, like Miriam Tave's All My Puny Sorrows, and Patrick Cottrell, I'm Sorry to Disrupt the Peace. But I also read things like Two Serious Ladies by Jane Bowles.
Oh, yes. Oh my God. No, that book was in dialogue with your book. I'm sorry. Direct dialogue.
You think so?
For sure.
Yeah, I love that book. I love the idea.
Too. I love that thing.
Like two people who don't know what they're doing, what's going on. Like,
you know what? I had this friend. She's such a dear friend. Her name's Jessica. She writes for Love to Review Books. And so she sends me this quote like every other day because she's known me for years and I've had some rough times. It's from that. Here we go. True enough, said Miss Copperfield, bringing her fist down on the table and looking very mean. I have gone to pieces, which is the thing I've wanted to do for years. I know I'm as guilty as I can be, but I have my happiness, which I guard like a wolf. And I have authority now and a certain amount of daring, which, if you remember correctly, I never had before. Jessica sends me this whenever she sees it. She sends it to me because it's like my theme song, guarding my happiness like a wolf.
Yeah.
What a sentence. And that does, you know, she does sound a little bit like Grace a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I read that.
Not like a copy, but I mean,
no.
There's like a feeling of that, you know, audacity and humor and pain all in one thing.
Yeah. I think that book and Purdy.
Yes, Purdy for sure.
Reminded me that like you can do anything.
Yes.
In a novel. And that's such a great reminder. I love one of the thing I love most about Purdy, and that I hope I often steal from him, is his attention to bodies. I just love the way his characters just get upset and fall on the ground and like foam at the mouth, and they have to be revived, you know, and picked up, and you get a hold of yourself. He just like allows them to be ridiculous, and also to say what they think and what they feel to each other. Everything is very naked, and I wanted that in this book. And so, you know, a couple of, you know, like Kirkus Review or something called it melodrama. Okay, if people,
it was stylized mannerism. You know what I mean? Like,
right, it's stylized,
like Hal Pinter does in a play. You know what I mean? I mean, it's way more dramatized in Hal Pinter in a play, but
right,
that's like
right. Which, by the way, I love the absurdists and I love Pinter, and that's what I wanted. Like, I want them to be yelling at each other and saying what they think and how they feel. Yeah.
I mean, there is a valor to like the kind of realism, you know, which Carver was, but not really. I mean, Gordon Lish, you know, however you play that out, where it's all like surface and you just have to have the rolling emotion underneath and nobody says what they think, you know. But I also think that people do go crazy and say really crazy shit to each other all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially if you grow up in a family where the mother's doing it, you're going to do it too.
For sure. And yeah, I love subtlety. And I think my book, I don't think my book is outrageous. Like, I think it's pretty controlled, but there are moments where, you know, everything is right out in the open and, you know, people are saying what they think. So, yeah.
Someone asked if there's any plans for this to be a movie. I could see it as a movie.
There are no plans. I have a movie agent, and you know, they're pitching it. We'll see. Those kinds of things are out of my control completely. So,
well, there is narrative tension. So if anyone here is a director or a producer, let me tell you, you want to turn the pages the way this novel is. And it's also set up. It's perfect. It's got 4 or 5 characters, so it's doable. Maybe the lake might be a little hard, but everything else is all right.
Yeah, I think he's definitely, I know there was someone who was thinking about a series and everything, but the agent is like, no, I think a movie is more of what this is. And I agree. I think it's more of a film
I could see this both
type of thing. But
good.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Well, let's I know, let's
I have to say, I also don't care. Like I wanted my book and I got it. And
are you writing a new book?
Yeah. So I have a story collection that I just sent in to my agent, and a novel that I'm working on for the past 3 years. And it's not going that well, but I'll get back to it. And I have faith that I can get it somewhere. I have to like remember that this is the way I work. It's a big mess and I don't know what I'm doing, and eventually I will.
And also, I think over time, I mean, I don't know, because I can't actually say with any expertise. I've written a memoir, a book of stories, and now I'm trying to write a novel. One thing I have noticed with like sentences, it's easier and easier to write those sentences. Like I'm not having to like think about sounds or move things around, like I've got my voice.
Yeah.
And that's a little dangerous actually. But I do think that if you work in the same form, and this is your second novel, like each one will get, I always think like, how does Anne Patchett like knock them off one after another? Well, she does write novel after novel, and she knows what she's doing now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? She's like, I'm going to move the past over here. And, she's not always writing the same kind. They're always set in different places and the situation is different, but she understands the form.
Yeah, it's true. And I kind of thought, oh, this will be easier this time. It's not, but
No.
I do know things that I didn't know before, which is that you just have to keep moving forward.
Don't get
and
stuck.
Don't get stuck. Keep moving forward. Make something happen.
Yeah.
You can change it later. You can fix it later. And that's the hardest part of it. I'm not doing what I did with this book ever again. I'm not rewriting something from beginning to end, 3 times. So I'm taking my time with this. I'm allowing things to sort of come to me before I sit down and work. But I'm definitely ready. It's going to be a few months before I get back to it, just because I have a lot going on the next 2 months.
Oh yeah, you have to enjoy this.
Yeah.
Everyone says to write another book while your book is coming out because it keeps you normal, but really also this is your first book. You need to go to book part. You need to throw just so that if anybody's going to be in New York on April 27th, Richard is a debut at the One Story magazine for his story. And I'm going to be escorting him, and he's going to be celebrated, and you can buy tickets, and it's a super fun literary party with unlike a lot of literary parties where it's like $1,000 to get in, it's like $100 to get in. And unlike a lot of literary parties where there's some writers, but they're just kind of sitting one at a table because it's a gala. All the writers are running around talking, and you get tons of books. If you can come to New York to the One Story Ball, I really would love for you to come and celebrate with Richard, because we're going to just like rip the top off the fun factory and just let all the confetti spoof everywhere all over the night. Also, I just had a thought though that I wanted to say, and then I got too excited about the party. No, how do you balance? Okay, we only have 4 minutes left, but how do you balance? Because I know you have a full-time job working in the government, like every day. What time do you have to be at work?
So yeah, I work for the state, but it's at the University at Albany, so it's a nice sort of atmosphere. I have to be at work at 8 a.m.
Holy man.
Yeah.
And then what time do you get off?
I get off at 4:30.
You go home and write?
Yeah.
Really? Do you take a nap?
No, I don't take a nap. Sometimes. I used to, when I wrote Brother and Sister, I really had a schedule. Like I wrote from 6 to 7 every night. And now it's more like whenever I feel like it, I sit in bed and write, you know, that kind of thing.
Because I try and write before work and it doesn't always work out. Like I try and write from about 8 to 10 or 8 to 9:30, and then I go to work at 10. And I'm actually taking a break right now. I've kind of beaten myself into the ground.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Do you take breaks? I mean, I've never taken a break.
Yeah.
So I'm actually very uncomfortable with it. I don't know what to do. It's been a week and a half and I feel
Lee, I
physically
hate it.
great.
Yeah.
But emotionally, I feel like, oh my God, you've given up your dream. You're going to die.
Yeah. I am so unhappy when I'm not writing. And this has been the longest stretch where I haven't been writing. Just because the book, it's just too much going on in my head.
Yeah.
You know, I wrote some essays before the book came out, and I don't find that fun at all. So I miss writing fiction.
Yeah.
But I also know it's not going to happen until at least June.
Yeah.
So I'm getting used to it, you know, but I miss it. Like I need to write.
Yeah.
So,
well, this was wonderful. Is there anyone in the audience has one last question that they need to ask? A burning question?
We had a question from Samantha who says the letter Grace gets from Nick is a gut punch moment. What made you decide to include that?
That was I included that late in the process of writing, and I just thought it was terrifying. Just a really terrifying thing. I don't want to give it away for anyone who hasn't read the book, but I thought about the way people who have encountered violence in their lives. I was obsessed with like survival shows and books about people who've been through, you know, horrible things. And sometimes the person who enacted the violence writes to the family or to the person, to the victim. And I just find that totally chilling. So it was just I thought, oh, that'll be an interesting little moment, especially for Justin, who is recovering. This is when he's still a teenager and kind of recovering. Yeah, so that was why I chose to do that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to our audience members first. Thank you for joining us tonight. Both Richard's book, Brother and Sister Enter the Forest, and Lee Newman's book, Nobody Gets Out Alive, are available from Gibson's Bookstore. Thank you very much, Lee, for joining us and being our wonderful In Conversation partner.
Well, thank you. I loved it. I love Richard's book. I think all of you should buy it.
And you know what? Your enthusiasm just like pours through the screen, and it's just, I'm excited. Like I felt myself leaning forward, and that's the best kind of event. And Richard, congratulations on the publication of your book. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Lee, too. And thanks, Gibson's Bookstore and everybody. Thanks.
All right. That's what we've got. Have a good night, everybody.